Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline, New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Retired Assistant Police Chief John Velleca makes New Haven tick. The word retirement might be there, but he's in the thick and as relevant as anyone you're going to meet on the police scene today. He's our resident criminal justice expert at WNHH, Sergeant at Arms at the State Senate. And he's here to talk with us to make sense about what's happening in New Haven streets. And rumor has it that we're going to be joined by WNHA station manager and heavy D Donald Trump devotee, Harry Dross, the bravest man in New Haven. Welcome back to WNHH, John.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. John, last week there was a big incident. You know, when you were in the department, there were big violent incidents every week, sometimes more than one, that you were rushing to the scene of, speaking to the public about, triple shootings, things like that.
Yeah.
Last week, no one got killed, but an exchange of gunfire, quote unquote, to use the words of state police, took place in Kimberly Square. And it was a big deal. It was actually a day where two interesting things happened and with the police. And there was a guy who was wanted, and the police spotted him in Kimberly Square at around 5 at night, 5:30, I think it was, 5:45. And they started to arrest him, and he ran away.
Right.
So then he was considered armed and dangerous, and they stationed cops all over, brought them in from all over the city, and the police radio went out. And they found him, I think, a driveway, and the guy allegedly had a gun that they recovered later. And it's unclear who shot first, but there was a gun that the guy had, and he shot, the police shot. The police were not hit. The guy was hit in the stomach. The guy then continues running.
Right.
Allegedly throws this gun over a fence. I think it was captured on video. And when the police caught up with him, some other cops, cops are amped up when they hear that an officer's been shot. And I understand it,
Mm-hmm.
That's the scariest part of being a cop, knowing that you might not come home. Then you're looking at a gun that might be, that's firing at you.
Right. So
the officers kind of close ranks when that happens, as you know. And, but the officers who caught this guy, they didn't take it out on him. Because often one thing you have to worry with human nature is that people get so upset in the moment, the adrenaline. They're not going to follow all the P's and Q's of mismanners etiquette. But in fact, they kept this guy alive.
Right.
The ambulance wasn't there yet, and they had him sit up. He was bleeding from the stomach. They pressed on his stomach to slow the flow of blood. And they kept talking to him to keep him conscious.
Right.
And they didn't know all the details, but they were aware by the end that this is a guy who allegedly fired at a cop. So I noticed that you were hopping right on the comments board. I love when you comment, by the way. Use your name. It's always intelligent. It's always provocative. It's always in a good spirit. Strong point of view, but never ad hominem.
Right.
And you came out, and you're often critical to cops, but here you came out right away and said, great police work.
It was, yeah.
Now my loaded question to you is, how were you convinced without all the facts in that was great police work?
Well, anytime an officer survives a police-involved shooting where they're being shot at, it's great police work. It's very difficult for the officer to, maintain their composure and continue a pursuit and actually fire on target to save their own lives and stop this person. So that in itself is great police work. And the fact that I'm not sure what you mean by...
well, here, let me just say from the beginning, there's no reason to believe it wasn't good police work.
All right. It was a wanted person. He was known.
We hear public information, and you and I hear private information.
All right.
And often there are cases where we hear something and say, well, maybe the police version isn't true. Yeah. Maybe the police did something wrong here. People suggest it. They may or may not be right. We wait for all the facts. And we don't have all the facts here, but we heard absolutely nothing at this point.
Right.
We went and talked to lots of folks in the neighborhood.
Right.
We often hear when there are questions raised. Sometimes they turn to be true. Sometimes they're not. And sometimes the cops are wrong.
Right.
We heard nothing to suggest that this cop was wrong.
Right.
So instead, my loaded question just is, so we know that a bunch of cops told the same story, and they probably were telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also true that sometimes cops will collect a story that isn't true to protect themselves so they don't get in trouble because they feel it was a dangerous situation, which it was a dangerous situation. Other times they are telling the truth, but they kind of have groupthink, and it turns out it's not, the evidence doesn't back it up when you look at video or get other corroborating statements. Right. So again, there's no reason to believe that's the case here.
Yeah.
But my question was, how do we get so sure that it was right until the state and again, I don't even trust state police investigating, to tell you the truth. They did terrible. They did a terrible job when they came on that police riot when they said a vicious canine on a 67 or 8-year-old, unarmed protester because they're mad at him. Something happened somewhere else minutes ago. Why were you so sure that? What if it turns out that they shot first, that the guy didn't have the gun pointed at him? It might not be true about the gun. I mean, I don't think any of that's true, John.
Yeah.
But why were you so sure?
Because, well, first when you have a plainclothes officer who's out there and he's looking and he's got the wherewithal to see somebody who's wanted on warrant, recognize them, engage the person runs, all right, so the person running, now we know that's chances are good that's the person we want. Now, whether the person drew the gun or whether they didn't draw the gun first, what I would do is I would side with the officer until something like that came forward to say that's not what happened.
Oh, yeah, and again,
I don't believe an officer would.
And because we have no information suggesting the cop didn't do right, we don't want to all make any bad assumptions about the officer. It is a harrowing situation. We want to be supportive of officers, and I like that the cops were supportive of the shooter too. Keeping him alive. But again, we have to be careful because it could turn. And again, there was no car chase, so there was nothing the police apparently did that escalated the situation. I want to bring that up in a minute about another case.
I could tell you that I've been involved in a number of police shootings, like we've talked about before. Myself being in some shootings, investigating other shootings. Usually, when these things happen, some things look cloudy, and then you kind of reserve judgment.
Right. And I say there was nothing cloudy yet.
Right. This doesn't look like this. Look like it's very. And plus, I know Frank Sanchez.
Who was the officer?
Yeah, and he's a very, very good police officer. He's always got control of himself. I can tell you directly, and I have no problem coming out and saying that.
That's an important point.
And,
because I know there was a shooting, for instance, one cop who does not have good control of himself. I've seen him escalate situations.
Right, so then you would say,
he once killed somebody, and the department probably was right that he shouldn't get in trouble because he was in a situation where he needed to fire. Right. But he had put himself in that situation and escalated the situation, and they failed to deal with the way he does that repeatedly.
Right.
Because you don't always have to fire a cop or discipline a cop if they have no choice in a situation. But if they get to that, I think where the police have fallen short is how do they put themselves in those situations? Like the whole Malik Jones, how did that cop end up in that lot?
There should have been, right. In other words, let's look at the whole thing, not just part of it. But I think that the police were antiquated in one regard, and I've been saying this for a few years now, and it doesn't go over very, very well, is that we judge things strictly on whether we were able to do it, instead of looking at whether we're, the moral use of police discretion. Should we be doing it?
Right. There are two situations. One is just outright misbehavior that needs to be disciplined.
Right.
But there's a whole realm of how do we train the cops.
Right. Could we do it? Sure. Should we do it? Maybe that's another question that we need to start asking.
And people get so defensive. Oh, you're against police. You're against
them
it's
staying
not
alive
really
because
questioning.
And I used to get that sometimes, not from the police because they understand what I'm saying, but from some people. Oh, how could you be anti-police? You're a police chief. It's not anti-police. The officers don't want to be involved in this either. This just takes a toll on them, too.
But if you look at that St. Patrick's Day video from a few years ago, and they just settled that case, by the way, when they throw an unarmed girl to the ground and she gets a concussion.
Did she have a knife or no?
In her pocketbook.
Oh, okay.
And they grab the knife. She's lying on the ground, not even sending her to the hospital.
Okay, so there's a good example, right?
They pull out the knife, and on video they're saying, hey, we got it. Like, this proves that we needed to treat her like a thug. And that we needed to be violent when they didn't. And that's the thing that to this day,
so
no one ever looked back and said we could have handled that differently.
Right, and that's all I mean. And this
they
is
got
not
so defensive. A lot of cops I think
because you know what happens. Sometimes the cops look at
mentality.
Hey, you're critiquing Officer A, and Officer A is a good police officer, and I believe Officer A is a good police officer, and I believe he did exactly what he was trained to do. But the thing is, we have to get a little bit further than that at this point. With everybody, with social media, the videos that are out there, it's going to be...
The problem is that video went viral, but the cops were so defensive that they wouldn't even listen, because no one thought this cop should have been fired, right?
Right.
But most people who aren't cops thought that's not the result you want. She had a little knife in a pocket, but she didn't have out. That doesn't mean you throw a 16-year-old girl handcuffed to the ground.
So listen, this is the thing. If you're making an arrest, could you do that legally? You probably could. Yeah, you should. Is it in line with your training? Yeah. Should you?
But in that case,
probably
John,
not.
The police union marched on City Hall, called for the firing of the chief and the mayor just because they questioned that. And that's what.
Well, here, you know what I say. and I'm going to say this, and we all know that I'm not a Dean Esserman fan, and I don't mind anybody knowing that. The thing with when the chief of police,
he's the former chief.
When chief of police stands up there and he's going to take a strong stance on something that's on video that the officers did, it begins with the credibility of the police chief and the validity he has to make that. When Dean Esserman says things like that, or he would never say things, because you look at him and say, listen, you were never a police officer, so I don't know what your frame of reference is.
Jim Lewis could have pulled that off.
Jim Lewis could have pulled it off. Because you know what Jim Lewis would have said? He would have said, look, he was within his training and he was within policy, but that's something we don't want to do. Maybe we're going to look at that to see if we could do something better in the future for it to happen again. Try and de-escalate it first.
Yeah,
but the cops would have that if Jim Lewis presented it.
I agree. Harry Jones, any thoughts on the last week's case in Kimberly Square when the cops shot at the suspect?
No, knowing what we know, which is not everything, it looks like good police work, like John was saying. So now the other one, the girl,
St. Patrick's Day, the teenage girl.
What was her behavior that led?
She had been in a fight in a club, so she came outside, and it was midday. Not at a club. I'm sorry, at a restaurant. And they handcuffed her. She was, not cooperating. But they slammed her to the ground.
I saw the video.
And there was no way you want that result. And then you see in the video, one of these cops digs in her bag, holds up this little knife triumphantly, and says, "We got it. She had a knife." Like, now this is going to justify a handcuffed teenage girl that we didn't even send to the hospital right away when she had a concussion. And these three big guys couldn't handle her without that result. But now I want to hear Harry's take.
No, well, for me, when you resist, something always happens, right? And yes, maybe the cops could have handled it differently, but your actions lead to stuff happening. So I think, probably both people could have been better.
I say that those things happen, right? East Hartford, they tased a teenager a few years back, and I think the kid was either he died or was on the brink of death. It's sustained serious injury. And the question was, should they have done it? Probably not. If it were me, okay, but if it were somebody else, maybe they did. Are they in line with policy and protocol? Yes, they were. Was this officer in line with policy and protocol? Okay, let's all get to the point where we understand that. But now let's talk about whether we should do it. If we don't talk about whether we should be doing it, it's going to happen again.
And what I worry about with Harry's point is that, yes, when you resist, bad things happen. You shouldn't resist. And the test often, not always, because sometimes the cops just mistake someone and go crazy, like in that Southern case where the guy was just at the convenience store at the gas station.
Yeah.
Shot him. But most of the time, someone's acting up. Malik Jones, drove away fast. And he was involved in criminal life, although the cop didn't know that.
Right.
But, Harry, when you say, well, something bad's going to happen, you resist, no question that's true. But what the test is, how do the police deal with the difficult people, not the easy people? And if no matter what they do is okay just because a person's difficult, that's going to have bad consequences for the ability to police our city.
Yeah, I'm not saying police acting badly is okay.
Or even not badly, but not handling it in the best possible way.
I'm just saying when you resist, you put the officer in a situation where he doesn't want to be in either, right? So
Agreed.
So it gets to the point where things happen. Cops aren't robots. Maybe we should get to the point where...
Very true.
But that's why they need training, and actions need to be reviewed.
Training is another thing, but emotions in a situation is a totally different thing.
Well, what makes a good rounded police officer is a combination of training and experience. So we have... New Haven has seen an exodus of a lot of experience. Now, I could tell you, when I first came on in the early 90s, you had a lot of older police officers, and a lot of them would sit there. Now, I watched the video. This young girl is screaming and yelling. She's acting up, and she's making a scene. I can remember a lot of older cops just sitting there, just waiting, and then would say, "Are you done?" because are you done now? So we got
slam her head to the ground on the sidewalk and then run around trying to justify it before you even see if she's okay.
And those are honest stories, and a veteran police officer would just, Mike Canning was a great guy for this. I don't mind telling. He would stay there and wait. Go ahead, air your vent, yell, scream. You're still going to jail.
So
I'm still going to do my job.
We can be compassionate for the younger officers about training.
Right.
And also experience, and we do have a challenge with that in the police department. I think there's opportunity that we have so many young cops. It's good to have energy and youth, but I think we're lacking that more experienced
Right.
flavor.
And the thing is,
you see what John is saying is let them throw a tantrum like a child,
and
and
just say,
then
well,
deal with
you know,
it afterwards. But at the same time, while they're throwing a tantrum, are they inciting?
Right,
the
so you
rest of the
can
people?
say interfere, incite, all that junk that makes it legal and puts people in the court system. But Harry, if they're really not inciting, do you have to look for a way to justify it by using that word?
So, but here, listen to this, Harry. Now, then this guy, I'm going to talk about him again. These people were throwing tantrums in the middle of, and listen, if you didn't know Congress Avenue or Washington and West back in the 90s, there was a lot of people out there, people yelling and screaming. And then listen, if it gets to the point where things are getting to be insightful, yes, then you end up with a hands-on situation.
But also
make
you
that the last.
escalate it.
But make the last resort.
Right, because if you go sooner, you escalated. I've seen situations on the street where it got worse. I'm thinking of this one officer again who shot the mentally ill person because he put himself in the position where he had no other choice. I've seen him escalate situations unnecessarily where it becomes tougher on the street because of what he did.
Right. But you see, that incident, and I'll be honest, that cop involved in it is a good cop. However, gaining experience means when you do something that may be less than desirable, not wrong, but something we could do better, unless you correct it, it's going to keep happening, right? So maybe you correct it, and the next time he comes into that situation, he handles it differently.
That's why you're right.
Or at least tries to.
That's why the chief needs credibility.
Right. So he could, you should have stood up there and said, listen, he was in line with training. He was in line with protocol. However, it's not the most desirable result that we wanted, so we're going to look at it and see if we can do things better.
And
now, if that was said...
That was said, and there's a lot of credibility when John Velleca is talking about criminal justice issue because he's the WNHH resident criminal justice expert, and he's here today in Dateline, New Haven, along with Harry Droz, who is the most popular man with the John Velleca base in our listenership here on Dateline New Haven 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenfm.org, and you just saw why that is the case. So the officers involved in the situation, not just Frank Sanchez, who fired the gun, but the others are put on administrative duty, or I think even leave. And some people thought that was a punishment, just like they did with that video story. Whereas in this case, it was so important because of how traumatic it is to be involved in that. And it's not like you're getting hurt. You're getting paid, but maybe you don't have to be thrown out right on the street for a week. Why do people see it as a punishment?
Because so many times administrative leave is associated with an ongoing investigation into wrongdoing.
We have a district manager who allegedly, kept his wife hostage for a week with the help of other cops and threatened to kill her. And had all these, illegally weapon and bullets, and I had the SWAT team there, and he's going to be on administrative duty till he retires. That guy, so it is often a way. Yeah,
we use it for many different things.
Like all these cops who have been arrested for domestic violence, they're all doing administrative duty.
Right, but for a shooting, it's a mandate.
Yeah.
Right, so you're involved. There's policy on that, and that's because there are a lot of things. One, to decompress, get the officer's mental state right, because don't forget, they're going to have to give statements, right? So we want them to have their mind about them. So we want them to relax, go home, not be filled with stress, and give us the most. And it's been shown over and over that a lot of times details come in these traumatic incidents 24, 48 hours later. And that's what we want to look at.
When did you? I forget, John. Did you ever shoot anyone?
Yeah, May 1994.
Did the person
and then
die?
The year after, no.
What was the situation?
It was Michael McKnight. He was. They were vertical Clemente. There was a field. There were two gangs were shooting at each other.
Wow.
And him and a friend fled, and I was coming in off of Button Street, and they were jumping the fence from Roberto Clemente, and they just appeared in front of my car, both guns in hand, and I just
were they pointing at you?
Well, Michael McKnight started to. I told him to drop it. The other one kid dropped it, and then McKnight started to backpedal and bring the gun up.
So were you thinking this is it? I might not go home that night.
Oh yeah, I was completely. To be honest with you, I probably wasn't thinking anything at all. But afterwards, I was scared to death.
So in the moment, one guy drops it, so you don't shoot him.
Henry Bradley, yeah.
The other guy didn't drop. It's interesting. The names are clear in your mind 20-something years later. Where did you shoot him? Did you think, I'm going to shoot this guy to kill? I'm going to shoot this guy. Where do you shoot him based on
the upper chest? I tell you, I wasn't. It wasn't as if I was able to sight up on him. I just had my gun trained in that direction, and once I saw the gun coming up, I just pulled the trigger. It could have very easily hit him anywhere or not hit him at all.
Did your first shot hit him?
I only fired once, yeah.
So you were a good shot.
I don't know. I think I got lucky. I was so nervous.
And
then
you're shooting at body mass. Right?
Yeah.
So what happened?
What
happened when he was hit?
Oddly enough, nothing. He said, literally, I can remember like it was yesterday. He still had the gun. It was lowered though, and he kept saying to me, "Can I talk to you? Can I talk to you?" I'll never forget that. And then I said, "Yeah, drop the gun." And he did. And I said, get down on the ground, and he did. And I walked over to him. He goes, I wasn't going to shoot you. I said, well, why didn't you drop the gun the first time I told you? I wasn't going to shoot you. And then the neighborhood converged, and then the police converged, and then that was the last of it.
And did you get to know this guy?
Well, yeah, he sued me, so I got to know him, yeah. I knew him beforehand. He was part of the a group of...
Which gang?
If you remember, the Flaming Knights, Leroy Bolden, 110, 112, Hurlburt
That was a
Street
motorcycle
back in the
gang,
day.
right?
It was, but there was a clique attached to the older guys there that used to sell drugs from the garage in the back.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
what happened? That guy got convicted.
He got convicted. He went to jail for 4 or 5 years, I believe.
And
He pled guilty.
and what happened when he sued you?
Oh, he lost. He lost.
He pled guilty and then sued you.
Yeah.
What was his basis of his suit?
Was that he didn't want to drop the gun because he felt if he dropped the gun it would go off and then I would shoot him. Norm Pax represented him way back in the day.
Wow. What did Norm think?
Well, I don't know if Norm thought he had a real good case, but
Well, that's really interesting because I mean, if the guy said I had the gun, I can't imagine someone
no, he
siding
said
against.
no, he
and-
said in his statement, he says I had the gun and yeah, I was pulling the gun up, but what I was going to do was show the police officer that I wasn't going to shoot him because I didn't want to drop the gun.
So what happened? You say afterwards you realized in the moment you were acting on instinct or
Right.
training.
Yeah.
What did you think after?
Oh, I mean, I just really, what I did really think I was like, I hope I didn't get in trouble for this, you know.
Trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, were you
shoot
hoping
somebody.
God, I hope he doesn't die.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
The guy must have gone to the
Oh,
hospital.
Yeah, I was hoping that he didn't. Yeah, that was a tough one.
And did you go on administrative leave?
I did. Yeah.
Like leave or duty?
I mean, went on leave and then I came back late duty.
For how
until-
long?
Oh, at that time it was like 6 or 7 months.
Oh, was that needed?
Well, you know, they didn't really. It wasn't really a.
The chief at the time was Nick
Witness
Pastore. Did he
Pastore.
sit with you?
Is it 6 or 7
No,
months while
he
they
didn't.
investigate? They were investigating it, or
Yeah, but that back then we did our own non-fatals, so it was our detective division that was investigating it, and it was completely up to the chief whether I went back on the street again.
And how did the chief feel about what you did?
He never talked to me about it.
Because I thought he had a policy like Esserman of talking to every cop who fires a gun, not to be mad at him, but just to talk
Oh
about
no,
why it
no, he
happened.
didn't. No, that's not true. He didn't do that. He didn't talk to Reggie Sutton when Reggie got shot. He didn't talk to a lot of guys.
Huh.
No, he never talked to me. The only who came up to see me was at the time Captain Runlet was a lieutenant at the time, Mike Canning, and the Sergeant Lanza was really good to me during that time because he had been involved in a few. Sergeant Sweeney.
I've interviewed. Speaking of Sweeney,
Yeah.
he shot someone to death.
Oh.
I've interviewed officers about killing people. They say that's a hard thing to get past the rest of your life.
It's a
not
hard
like
thing just
cop
to shoot
wants
them,
to
to
kill
be honest with
anybody.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that whole it's like it's a difficult situation to be in. You know what I mean? It's something you'll never forget. I'll put it to you that way. You know, it's something Frank will never forget. You know, and Frank is a
Now,
very
speaking of Frank
even-keeled guy.
Sanchez, who fired that gun, he's an undercover officer, and he was searching people with warrants.
Yeah.
He had 2 in one day. He had 2 dramatic cases on Monday involving wanted people and chases. The early one.
Oh, the one with the
Yeah,
airport,
so
right?
Because that was in the afternoon. In the morning, I was just reading yesterday. I went to court. I got the warrant. In the morning, he had spent 2 days looking for this one guy who had violently raped women.
Yeah.
And was considered still dangerous and armed. He went to Bridgeport, where he is last seen. Followed him up, lost him. Waterbury. He spotted him downtown earlier the same day, a week ago Monday, and he spotted him. The guy bolted in his car. Police followed him to Tweed, New Haven. The guy drove his car, first got out, got back in, drove at the cops, and then smashed his car on the airport tarmac and through a gate, went on the highway, went into West Haven, got chased in West Haven. Then they didn't give us a lot of details on this. So then they were going back on Forest Road, chased by those West Haven cops. And Babs Rosavi, as a shower, happened to be driving to West Haven at the time. Sees all these cars speeding through and the guy's car with the cracked windshield.
Right.
They follow him at the West Philly. Just the car gets another car. They find him in the Amity lot and they arrest him. Those chases, I wondered, do you have any questions about the high-speed chase? It was necessary. This was a violent person.
Yeah.
Did it make it worse?
Well, you know, I'm not a proponent of police chases. Anybody that's ever worked with me or for me will tell you that. But they're like anything else. They're a necessity in this job. I mean, you certainly
Was it a
can't-
necessity here?
I don't know all of the details for that, so I would refrain from unless I could,
And this
look
was
at
a
the entire thing.
multi-department incident. So,
They all become multi-department.
so in other words, part of it occurred in West Haven.
right.
So, like, I read the New Haven report, and I don't have any reason to question what the New Haven cops did, but there are a lot of lacunae, a lot of gaps, even in that report.
Yeah.
They don't say, like, at what points they were chasing, what points they weren't.
Right.
Because I do think that's another kind of police tactic that doesn't get examined enough. When the chases create more of a problem when
Yeah.
you're balancing the risk.
I think that with regard to shootings and chases and things like that, the officers are a little bit of a gun shy to admit that they've engaged in these things, even though they are completely within their duties to do so, only because the critique is so fastidious over these incidents. So they're afraid. So they figure if they make it look like it's not a pursuit, people won't critique me as if it was a pursuit. But if it's a pursuit, then it's a pursuit. I mean, that's what we do. Sometimes
but the cops get
okay.
more in danger if they pursue unnecessarily too.
Well, I think it's upwards of 80 some odd percent. They are over 90 ending the crash, and close to 90, the officer or an innocent civilian are hurt. It seems to never be the guy who took off. But yeah, I mean, listen, that's another high stress situation.
I just wish we had more details. So there's always this question that when a case is still under investigation, they say we can't give too much information because that blows the investigation.
Right.
And in some cases, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Because they have to interview witnesses, and if the witness sees the official report, then they'll know how to tailor their story.
Right.
But that becomes a blanket excuse to never tell the public what's going on. So we have these new body cameras, but when it counts, we can't get the video because they say we have to hold it.
Right.
So this Ray Tennant case, the district manager who allegedly kept his wife hostage for the week and maybe with collusion of top cops, we're not going to find out for a year because they say that we can't release our investigation or finish it until this criminal case is done. And there's no way they need a year to be interviewing everybody. And there's no way that even on this chase, they couldn't have given us more information of what happened. Even at Kimberly Square, I would argue that the state police can release more information than they do. And I'm concerned that, again, it's a case where we say just because we can legally withhold information from the public, therefore we're going to do it.
Yeah, I was pretty
you were
liberal
always on the
with what I
extreme.
said.
You were always released information except if it could jeopardize the case, and you explained why very specifically. You thought, because you saw not just the need to keep some information quiet, but the need to release it if it did need to be quiet so the public could understand what police does. Dude, I wish that there were at least two other cops who felt that way in authority.
It's not even the fact that people are curious and they want to know. Some of those major incidents, there are still people now living in that neighborhood who are legitimately afraid. So they need to know.
And public confidence in the cops. People always assume the worst of the cops. And when you look at the incident, more often than not, the cops had a good reason for what they did.
Right.
But you don't know that if they don't share the info.
The state police has a policy. They just, in other words, they'll come into a municipality like ours and they won't really take into consideration what's going on with the neighborhood.
But the New Haven department has gotten back to that, too.
It's pretty good. Because we realized years ago that...
No, they've gone backwards, John. So we've had 4 cops arrested for domestic violence. Yeah. And they won't tell you anything. The only reason we found out about one of them, Alex Morgillo, last week, is because when you're in open court, they have to talk about stuff because there was an argument at what to do with them. Yeah. But if we hadn't been in open court, we wouldn't have found out what he did, allegedly, which he did not deny, to his girlfriend, calling her a little whore, punching her in the face, throw her on the ground, and spitting tobacco on her just because she was sitting with an ex-boyfriend. But the other thing that came up in court that wouldn't have come up because of this extreme anti-First Amendment public accounting position of the cops, it turned out that he had previously, he had a gun owned that was in the hand of a convicted felon. And the police never arrested him. So here's the catch-22. Most people would be arrested for that because they were protecting one of their own who had a violent tendency otherwise. Therefore, they can say, well, we can't tell you about that because there was no conclusion of an investigation.
Right.
I think there's a catch-22 that's protecting violent cops with domestic violence tendencies.
Well, before I throw the C word out there, as far as corruption, I would have to know all the details
I don't
before
think it's
I would.
corruption. I think it's
or misconduct, rather.
I don't think it's misconduct. I think departments have such a bias toward just never releasing information.
Well, I mean, look at you just got a Milford officer, who was working narcotics, quite frankly, and she got into a car accident, and Ham didn't have any problem throwing her picture out there.
That's true, Ham yeah. But look at New Haven. So this guy last week, Morgillo, David Strollo is the prosecutor, and I always thought he was very pro-cop. He was really mad because...
He's very fair, David Strollo. He's a good man.
He got really upset in court because here's this guy, Morgillo, who allegedly beat his girlfriend. He's a cop. The New Haven Police Department won't tell us anything about what he allegedly did, even though he was arrested, because it's under investigation. Even though at this point, everyone was interviewed, there's no point that they have to keep it forever, the details.
Right.
Turns out he's playing loose with a registered firearm that anybody else would get arrested for doing what he did. Yep. So Strollo's saying, don't let this guy off. But his lawyer's saying, give him the family violence education program, and then if he goes through it, dismiss his case.
Right.
And some people, including our commenters who are cops, said, well, gee, everybody else gets that. He should. Strollo was
That's true.
incensed. Strollo said in court, and Strollo always makes excuses for police misconduct in the past. He said this should not get off. This is not like everything else. He's had specific training in how to deal with this, and we give him special responsibilities and privileges as a cop. And there is no way, especially when you add in this previous case with the gun that his own department did nothing about, there's no way we should sweep this under a rug 13 months.
Not sweeping it under a rug.
13 months it gets dismissed, and he goes to this program. So for 13 months, they're not going to release any information about when an officer who's still an officer and is supposed to respond to domestic violence cases allegedly did this horrible thing to his girlfriend, has these proclivities, can't handle firearms responsibly. Somehow we're going to give this guy still a gun to be a police officer, have him respond to domestic violence cases, and get it swept under the rug. Harry, what, you're shaking your head.
No, because, well, a regular citizen, if he gets arrested for domestic violence and he owns a gun, what happens?
They take the gun, and he goes through the court system.
What if
There
he
you go.
separately had his gun be used by a convicted felon, the commission
His
of a
gun
crime?
if his gun was used by, he gets arrested.
You see, this guy wasn't.
Right.
So this did not, and Strollo was trying to bring up, look, this guy, we don't want him right out there
But
on the
but
force.
the judge was right saying that has nothing to do with this. One doesn't have anything to do. Listen, here's what I say.
But what about why do we want this? Why do we want this guy to be a
Well,
cop?
you're looking at two separate aspects of it. Listen, we're in the courts. There's no set of, laws that are for police officers. The police officers are governed by the same laws as everybody
But
else.
remember, John, you were the one who earlier said there's leeway. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
And that was Strollo's case. With every case, a judge has discretion. You don't have to give everybody a chance to have this go away.
Sure. And I don't think that the judge should have used his discretion in any other way that he did.
Very discretion.
I think that all of what Strollo's talking about has got to go back to 1 Union Avenue. And that's where that needs to... Listen, he's going to get what he gets in court because that's what he's supposed to get. That's what everybody gets.
So for 13 months, the police department, just because they don't have to tell us what happened, isn't going to tell us
That's
what
another.
happened.
That's completely up to the chief executive of the PD. That it's for me to say whether he should or shouldn't is merely my opinion
What's your opinion?
on whether he should.
Should the public know what this guy did?
I think that the details of the case after it's adjudicated should be public. Sure.
But what if it's 13 months so he goes to a program so it's not adjudicated for 13 months?
I would err on the side and say, how do the other things go? Is it public record for everybody else? If it is, then it should be for him too. We'd have to look at the test case and say, okay, how about
And
everybody
what about
else?
the argument Strollo case? If you're a police officer and you have special training in how to deal with domestic violence, and
I
you
don't
have a
believe-
history.
I don't
you-
think that should come into the effect of the court. I think that
even though
that should go back
even though
to the
that cop
police
is going to be
department.
now. So if I call in a domestic violence, I'm not going to be. But, if someone calls in a domestic violence case,
Yeah.
they're going to have Officer Margillo coming. Is that a good thing for
Hey,
the public?
well, wait a second here. We send out these programs, and they're diversionary programs, so people don't go to jail, so we can do what? Rehabilitate them. So hopefully in 13 months, Officer Margillo is going to be rehabilitated, and he's going to be able to handle that call. And he's going to be able to do what he needs to do as a police officer. Now, if he can't do that, that's what the chief has to discern, whether he
John
can actually make
Velleca,
that rehab.
We just had a recruit who 3 times was recommended to be removed from the force before he starts because of violent incidents. It took a 4th case where he beat up his girlfriend for him to be removed. You
Right.
really have confidence?
I'm not saying whether I have
this case
confidence
is-
at all or not. I'm just saying to you what I think the process should be. I can't affect the outcome at this point because I'm not the chief of the New Haven Police Department, right? So I can't tell you whether I have confidence or whether I don't. I'm just saying this is where it should be. They're two separate realms. One
And
is
to be
in the
fair
court.
to that, you also have union rules that protect people,
Right,
which you should have.
Listen, you could look at this case, and say, listen, to be honest with you, hypothetically now, if I were the chief there, I would have an issue with this. I would want to talk to this person. I want to talk about the gun thing, and I want to know why he wasn't arrested for the gun. I mean, that's a big deal, okay? But you have to hold out a degree of, I don't want to say forgiveness, but you have to understand that if you're...
We do believe in rehabilitation for
Right.
cops as well as people, but that
Of
doesn't
course.
mean you have to then still give them a weapon and the ability to take away our liberty. If somebody else I want to give a second chance to, that doesn't mean, hey, come on out if you killed someone, and by the way, take my little girl to the market.
No, listen, I get you, and that's what I'm saying. That's the job of a police chief, to weigh both of those and say, listen, is
Yeah.
this person
And a police
somebody...
commission.
And a police commission,
So,
moreover,
Harry,
because
you-
they
you-
hire and fire.
Are you happy with Alex Morgillo going to domestic violence calls?
No, absolutely not. I would stick him on a desk That's what I would do.
That's what they do for 13 months.
But not just for 13 months. I would not give him his firearm back. I would stick him on a desk.
Wait a minute. The normal person in public, they go through and they get their firearms back. Why now he can't? Why can't Margello have it?
I don't do good with the domestic violence part of it because
and the Department's got a serious problem with domestic violence, and they're not dealing with it.
It's just ridiculous if you're gonna forgive that and then put his wife or his significant other in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. I just don't do good with that portion of it, the domestic violence part of it.
Right. So I think that's a decision to be made by the chief of police, to be honest with you. And I think that's going to be where it rests. And you're going to have to go through some other different things, maybe some psychological exams when he's ready to get going again, and maybe some other counseling, maybe mandated counseling, and maybe, some other controls that you could maybe put into place to see if it's okay to send him out there. But I certainly don't think that he's involved in a domestic violence incident, and he's looking for rehabilitation. He's admitting he did something wrong. I have a problem. Help me out. I think that he should get the same.
You think he was really saying, help me out?
Well, listen
He's
to me.
hiding behind his lawyer so his picture can't be taken. Is he saying, help me out?
I don't want to look at everything as being nefarious, right? Maybe he really does say, listen, I did something I shouldn't have done. I'm a cop. This is terrible. I'm embarrassed by this. I want to fix it.
Or I'm one of many cops arrested for domestic violence and we can get away with it and continue to patrol the streets.
Well, listen, I know
I'm giving you a
you're
hard time. I think
no.
you're
not giving me a hard time.
You're
because
saying if we're going to be humane about the rest of society, we got to be humane about cops too, because they're people.
Right.
And I'm saying cops have special responsibilities and powers.
Right, but if we also, and you have been talking about this now for years, if we also believe that we're going to put police officers in uniform who are infallible and never make mistakes, we're not going to have a police department because we recruit from the human race.
That's a good point.
Right?
That's a good point. And it's also a good point.
I agree, but someone who's... This is a second strike, right? Because you said the firearm.
But he got away with it. And as John pointed out, the judge couldn't act on that.
So now
it's a pattern. Well, right? It starts creating a pattern of behavior.
But wait a second. Isn't it a pattern? Is it Margello's fault, though? Now, let's go back to what we talked about slamming the girl on the ground. If you see bad behavior and you don't correct it, it happens again. Maybe if he got a pinch for the gun, he would have stopped and cleaned everything up.
And maybe
said,
you can remind people that they're listening to Dateline New Haven on WNHH 103.5 FM live stream NewHaven.org. We got our criminal justice team here on the beat here. John Velleca, retired assistant chief, New Haven Force, and acting chief. He's been in charge of a couple of departments, and hopefully another again. And Harry Dross, WNHH station manager, and our heavy Donald Trump devotee. the former captain of the New Haven Police Department just got a $50,000 payout. She sued the department, Patricia Hellinger, saying that she was unfairly treated on a bunch of cases. And this is what stuck in my craw, John Velleca, because I reported on these cases. I read the reports. She was disciplined, and not even really disciplined,
right?
for lying under oath about abusing someone in a parking lot where she didn't like where he parked, and then took his camera away when she was filming. Lied about it. Video showed she lied. In other cases, she got mad at Spanish-speaking immigrant who... kid was being sexually abused by saying, "Got to speak English. I won't look into your case." She had done a number of things like that, and then the fact that, and she only got her hands slapped, and she got promoted,
right?
And she still sued the department, and she got a $50,000 settlement, which means wants to take this and go away because it'll cost us more to fight it.
Exactly.
But why? Everyone, all these lawsuits get filed by cops and others. Anytime people leave who have screwed up,
right,
and we pay them.
Well, the funny thing is that you speak to other chiefs of police, and when I was chief of police, that's the running thing. You can't fire anybody without expecting a lawsuit. Everybody who gets fired or dismissed,
or even if they don't fire,
right.
they feel they have to leave. Like the head of the schools of New Haven's COO school board, he didn't like changes. He just left.
Yeah,
and he negotiated $100,000 settlement. He got a new job the next day, another high-paying job. And his argument was that, we'll give it to him because otherwise they'll sue us and get us more. And there was not the slightest evidence any laws were broken.
So, but until the court process is fixed, people are going to be able to sue for anything they want to sue for. And the reality is, yes, a lot of times it's a business decision about whether you
so
settle.
That encourages more public employees to just bilk taxpayers by filing these suits.
Yeah,
I know, Harry. Are you happy about it?
No, but I'm surprised it was so low.
that's because she had no merit to it. I don't
Yeah,
get.
I mean, the lower it goes, it's more
Yeah.
I
like
mean, the
look,
lawyer gets a third. I mean,
that's what
Yeah,
I mean. You
that's
get
what
when
I'm
you
saying.
start to see settlements like that. She's breaking even, really. When it
Yeah.
comes to, she just wants to get out of it without spending any more money.
oh, another issue that came up with the police this week, something you guys are familiar with, is response time.
Right.
So violent crime's down in the city. People are upset now, which is a luxury. They were upset about the other crimes, burglaries, and there are a lot of them. A lot of people
Right.
don't report them. A lot of stores are getting hit, people's cars. And it takes cops hours sometimes to respond because we're down a lot of cops. We're
Right.
budgeted for 490, we're well under 400 because of people leaving for retirements, resignations, moved by other departments, and out on leave. So the department has to prioritize.
Right.
And so one guy, Rodney Williams, who liked how the cop dealt with it when he came, but he had to wait an hour, which on the short end,
Right.
on some burglary stuff. People can't wait long enough. They have to go to work or have life,
Yeah,
3
yeah.
hours. He's saying, can't you fix this? And Chief Campbell says we could start by having a cop in charge of the 911 call center,
Yeah,
PSAP,
agreed,
Public
agreed.
Service Agency Products.
Mhm.
Now, a few years ago, we went away from that model because we used to pay both a fireman and a cop, firefighter and a cop, to run that center.
Right.
The idea was one civilian could do that just fine,
Yeah.
and we'll pay less. Now, some people, every time there's a problem now, unions had a self-interest in that, said, well, you see, that was the problem. Other people, we had one person writing about this in the Independent response to our story on this saying, I've worked in PSAP. It was the
Right.
same before and after. Sometimes bad stuff happens and there are problems, but it's not about having a uniform person or two in there. Thoughts on that, you guys?
I don't agree with. Was that former employee?
Mhm.
All right, so whoever that was made a couple good comments. I do believe, though, my rebuttal to that was exactly what part of the problem is now. I worked communications. I mean, as a sergeant, we were all required to work communications on a rotational basis. So I've been up there quite often on the midnight shift. And the reality of the situation is if you have a uniformed supervisor in there, not just a police officer, but the uniformed supervisor, on the many occasions I've done it, I know my colleagues have done it, will look at the screen and say, hey, Harry's been on this job. It's this type of a job. He's been out there for twice the amount of time it should usually take. We have this call holding. Pull him off the job, right? And then
And the information can't be sent to a supervisor, the patrol supervisor who's not in the 911 center to
right,
make
the
that
patrol.
call.
Yeah, I mean, like I said,
Why do they need to be running 911?
Well, because some really adept supervisors in the field will monitor it. But let's say hypothetically we have a shooting, right? Then the supervisor goes off to the shooting. He's tied up at the shooting for a couple hours. He's certainly not
Okay, so
watching
you're
the
saying
holding
we need
pattern.
it on site.
Right. The supervisor's communications is specifically tasked to keeping the flow of calls moving, right? So when we used to come in on the midnight shift, calls are coming in, they're hot calls, and then you're looking at 45, 50 calls in the holding pattern. We used to have to try and get that clear before the next shift comes
So
in.
what can we do with fewer cops to get more separate from PSAP?
Yeah.
What can we do when we don't have that many cops on anyone's shift, especially overnight, to respond faster?
Yeah. I think listen.
I think you tell the citizens to go self-report to the police station because
But they need to come to the scene of the.
sometimes
And you
they
can't
really
remove
don't
the
need
evidence?
to get to the scene. It's your car's broken in. I had this happen to me in Waterbury, and I remember waiting one time, and calling, oh, the cop's on his way, and then he got pulled off.
Mhm.
Waiting there hours, and I'm like, would this be easy if I just go down to the police station? Oh, it would be wonderful if you came down and filled out. I said, this is what I'm going to start doing from now on whenever I have a problem. Just going to go straight to the police department.
Right.
And
But
deal
if a
with it
cop
there.
comes when you go to your insurance company, you have an independent eye that said this actually happened. Otherwise, everyone can go and just make up what happened.
I don't think they go even that deep. But the thing is, nowadays you should probably have that online where you have the opportunity to
Gotcha.
fill forms
Now,
and
is
send
there
it in.
different kinds of cases? Are there certain kinds of cases where it's important that an officer get to the scene, even if it's not a violent crime?
Well, the dispatcher's assistant should be asking certain questions to see if there's evidence at the scene. If it's strictly something that was done, you have no idea who did it. There's no evidence there. That should be something expedited
What's
over the
that?
phone.
What stops people
and you
from
have
making
the
up?
citizens taking their own pictures these days, right? So
Right, which is fine.
Yeah.
But what
Take
if,
the
what if
pictures
you're
and-
not honest like Harry? And Harry is a very honest guy.
Right.
Not everybody's honest like that. What about people just making stuff up to collect
Yeah, well,
insurance money?
that's
They had
the
that
concern
great
with
case
everything.
where
yeah.
New Haven had this guy claim that all these artifacts were stolen from his car, and he had this whole history of making up that stuff. You remember a few months ago?
No.
That was great at the hospital. He parked his car. And,
Oh yeah.
yeah, he was a
No,
real.
I do think that there is a part that to clear up the confusion. In other words, the call isn't dispatched, and then the officer is hanging around and takes an hour to go. the officers are going as soon as they're dispatched. The delay is in the dispatch, right? So that's not to blame the dispatcher.
No, but I thought the cops have too much to do. Like we've been hearing that they just
so they're
don't
not in
have
service. Okay,
they
so
have
here's
one or
how
two
it goes.
people overnight for the whole west or east side of the town. And
I don't know about that. One or two people on the
That's what we're
whole
told, that
sector of
there's
the
some-
town.
there have been
I highly doubt that. And for whoever's talking about 20, 25 cops on the overnight, that's all we ever had. Listen, at one point,
But are there ways we can do people power differently so that more people could be on the street? Like some
no, I
people
think
say,
it's. I
you
seriously
said we need fewer cops and they shouldn't be walking beats.
listen. If you're supervising these guys and you're watching the time they're spending on calls, because listen, I worked that job long enough to tell you, I get it. We're down cops, so you're going to have to wait. But there's also more efficient work that can be done out there. Okay, nobody's watching these guys. Some of them.
So better
some of
supervision
them,
can use the
right.
more efficiently. What
some
about
of them are taking too
what
long. They
about
could be
special
moving
units?
on.
We've created some terrific special units called cakes units, for instance. That
I would stay away from special units in the patrol division because it takes away from the general mission. All right, you start to
what I mean is some people saying disband some of these units so we get more cops
get
on
more
the
cops on the
street.
street. I agree.
But other
100%.
people say one reason our crime is so low is because the great
oh,
work
that's a
done.
crockish. That's
Really, you don't think those state, federal,
No.
local task forces got
listen.
Cody,
Okay, so how
Cody
about,
Franklin's away, and
no. Those sure.
so you don't want to disband those
disband what?
special units.
What's you have any idea how many special units there are?
So what special units can we disband?
I'm not going to get into that
No,
because
what
I don't.
kind? Give me
No,
an
I'm not.
example.
I'm not going to do that.
But you're
'cause
convinced
that's-
there are some.
Yes,
But you
they
wouldn't-
can be streamlined. There
But
is
you
no
wouldn't
doubt in my mind.
disband the unit that the detectives who meet with the feds in the state regularly 4 times a week and focus
No, there
on
are there are some units that pay dividends. Okay, but I will tell you directly without mentioning units that work is being replicated by units there. Okay, and there are people doing the same thing.
So you're saying we can manage the officers who are on the street better to be more efficient, and you think there are
Right.
some units,
Listen,
but for some
there
reason
are
you're not
some
willing
units.
to mention those.
There are some units that start an investigation, pass it to another unit, who passes it to another unit, passes it to another, passes it, and then they're all tied up on one job.
So you think there's a management challenge that we can have fewer cops but not have these long?
Listen, I think that and I can't
times.
tell you because I'm not in there every day, and this is not a critique of the command because I don't know what the inner workings. However, I know from in the past when we were short officers in patrol, there was a sweeping transfer of. I was part of it at sometimes. If you're a patrol officer and you're in the bureau, the chief sent everybody back. And the only people that maintained in the bureau were gold badge detectives, and we
but then we
struggled
can't
through.
investigate as many cases.
What cases? The crime is down.
And why is crime down?
Well, I mean, God, we could talk about that. That's crime is down everywhere. I mean, what is it? It's a rotation of the offending demographic, the less alcohol use. I mean, we would go on and on about why crime. We
Is it
speculate
down
why
because
crime
we
is
have
down.
a large police department?
No,
Harry, why is
don't
crime
think
down?
you don't have a large police department, right? You just said you're low. You're 300 some odd guys.
I don't know. I think a lot of the people who used to commit the crimes are too old to commit the crimes,
Or in jail.
right? And then or
I
in
think Cody
jail.
Franklin was worth
And then
like
you
10% of the rate, wasn't
Then you
it?
have this
Yeah,
lazy
Jermaine Harris, too.
generation that not only won't go look for jobs, but they won't
I
even
didn't say
commit
that.
crimes.
So Harry's analysis is that the millennials are
It's
too lazy to
generational.
commit crimes.
Yeah.
It's generational.
That is definitely. I
They're
think that
home,
we
they're
have
home
just.
playing video games.
I think you have just heard, folks, a novel theory
From Harry.
for the drop in crime in America that these darn millennials are too lazy to go hold people.
They're
up.
lazy criminals. Nobody wants to commit crime anymore.
Where's our country going?
Yeah, when we can't get good criminals, what is going on?
Well, we got one in the White House, but that doesn't seem to be enough.
Oh, there you go, Harry. He couldn't let it go.
Not gonna take the bait.
All right. And we're just going to. That was a cheap shot. That wasn't fair. But that's life. That's Dateline New Haven, which you're
Yeah.
listening to. Thank you so
Funny.
much for joining us today. Thanks to our guest, criminal justice expert, the top brain in the field, John Velleca.
Yeah, thank you very
along
much.
with Harry Dross. And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight.
Harry, you
Fly
got your
free
own
with
show
us
on here?
all day and all night long
have your
here at WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.